Today on Locked On Rockies, always nice to see the Rockies play quality baseball, a sign that there is more to be optimistic about than we focus on. But at the same time, some numbers just continue to be ugly.
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast. This is the 7th day of August, and we are bringing you daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every single day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot. You found the right podcast for you. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services. We are also on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind. Just like Matthew Garcia says, this was a good episode, talking about our episode yesterday. I'm one of the ones that bet the over 60.5 wins, like the future on our friends FanDuel had. $100 to win, $190. I knew we weren't going to the postseason, but I believed we were better than we were last year. And so if you're curious about my thoughts on can the Rockies hit over 60.5 wins this year, you can check out yesterday's episode. I'll just spoil it for you. Yes, I do, but it is going to be close. And the big determining factors of that: home performance and how the Rockies do against the division, because they got some division matchups that really don't treat them kind, have not treated them very kind whatsoever. So you can dive into that. But today we're going to talk about the Rockies playing quality baseball and just kind of how, when you watch a game like yesterday, it's just nice to see the Rockies play good, clean baseball and, take care of business and nothing really sticking out in terms of issues or problems. The entire approach to the game was solid and headlined by a few solid performances. We'll talk about the Rockies still playing well against 500 teams that are above 500, but the numbers really aren't great. And again, the one thing that is clearly an outlier for the Rockies, it's run differential. So we're going to talk about all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we dive into everything today, this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code LockedOnMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. All right, folks. So the game last night, I'm watching the game, and you know what? It's just good baseball, and it's a sign of a good, solid foundation for the Rockies. It also opens up an interesting question I think I have for the Rockies and kind of what they're going to do. Jake Cave is quickly becoming the next veteran guy that the Rockies might extend for far too long. Like, is he, in my eyes, is Jake Cave the next CJ Crone? I think he's got some potential of that. But man, the guy is ready for big moments. He doesn't shy away from them and has provided clutch veteran play for the Rockies in moments in which they need him. I mean, overall, again, still we can pick into the issues and overall, some of the overlying things, like he's a negative. He's not technically playing at above replacement level in terms of stats. But in terms of moments, in terms of presence, he's done a good job. It's great to see that he has clearly embraced what his role is on this team, and it clearly impacts the Rockies and it clearly impacts the players in that dugout. They really do listen and respond to the veterans on that team. Another thing that's enjoyable to see, although the fact that it's man, I don't know if it's not the fairest comparison. It's just like I was going to call him Two-Face, but that's not. It really is Ryan McMahon. Man, that the defense. Whoa, Gobbs just like, holy cow. How does he makes multiple incredible plays in that game, is a total game changer. But then he goes 0 for 3 with only a walk, and you just sit there and you're like, oh, like it. That's the Ryan McMahon game and experience. So I bring these storylines up and I bring these things up just because That's how I feel like with when I find, on some of these Rockies storylines, it's you can sit there and you look and you can honestly be a little more jazzed, a little more enthused by some of the results and some of the performances and individual games like yesterday in which the Rockies play good baseball. Kyle Freeland gets 7 strikeouts. The bullpen doesn't, the bullpen handles business. The Rockies get timely offense. I don't want to just go back and re-preach the consistency thing, but our overarching theme of consistency returns again. It's do that again tonight. Do that again tomorrow. Do that again the day after that. Continue to do it against these teams and then do it on the road. So how do we build there? That's obviously the big questions. But I bring up those the McMahon and the Cave storylines because I just am, it just feeds more into just like, I see it, but I don't at the same time with like, man, you can take the sample size, you can take these things, you can really look at it, you can really break it down, and you can be intrigued and enjoy and like what you're seeing on the field. But are you truly, as a Rockies fan, like, how would you feel about a Jake Cave extension? And how would you feel about a Jake Cave extension of 2 years? That's the type of stuff I think about when I, because it's awesome. It's great. It's fun that Jake Cave has become a fan favorite and a guy that has found his way into big moments continuously for the Rockies. But does he not feel like this year's CJ Cron? Does he not feel like this year's Brent Suter? Does he not feel like these guys? I mean, I know Suter didn't stay with the Rockies, but does he not seem like the guy that is going to show some flashes, show some of this, and then the Rockies overreact to it? Because it is really interesting to see now. I mean, Chris Bryant has another thing to be excited about from last night. It's not power, but it's 2 hits from Chris Bryant. Chris Bryant has impacted games since he's returned, but it's, again, can you have both of them on the team for a while? They both played left and right field, but again, both of them being in the lineup means other players aren't playing, means people aren't being called up. So it just kind of, I don't like it to like, I don't like when it puts a damper on me watching good moments from Jake Cave and good moments for the Rockies, because you watch games last night and that's just enjoyable baseball. That's the Rockies having, showing success on defense, showing success from their pitchers, and getting good offense against the team that, is fighting against an above 500 team, against a team that has come alive. But then I do see myself just wandering into that big picture narrative, and maybe that's just because I'm podcast hosting, and maybe that's because it's probably different, I would imagine, for the fans out there, that the Rockies is, I watch them, the game is over and I am done, and then I go back and I watch the Rockies the next day, and every day is the new day, and who knows what could happen. And I like that. But so maybe it's podcaster brain I got going on there. But it is still, though, I'm watching, I just still want to see that Ryan McMahon fully put together situation. I really don't want to negate the fact that last night was a game you do feel a little bit more confident in the Rockies. You do feel a little bit more confident in the possible what if scenarios of the Rockies being, what happens when they put it together. And some of these pieces do look good. I mean, Brendan Rodgers looked good last night. Brendan Rodgers looked real good last night. Elias Diaz, had some big hits last night. Tovar getting a base knock. Brenton Doyle getting a base knock. I mean, everybody did their job yesterday. Mixed in, I mean, and highlighted especially by a real brilliant day by the bullpen. You might not, Lawrence and Angel might not have gotten a bunch of strikeouts. I got to remember to make sure I'm pronouncing this. I missed on the pronouncers there, I think. But, it's giving up hits, but preventing the damage, buckling back down. Like, as frustrating as it's been to watch Justin Lawrence this year, it's nice to see those moments. It's nice to see him fight through those things. It's encouraging to see that stuff because as a young arm, is there more bounce back? But it's just are these brief flashes enough for you to be overly impressed with the Rockies and to sit, and then how much do the numbers kind of muddy things up for the performances that we see? Not to focus on it, but when you really look at some of them, it's still kind of ugly. But don't let it take away from the fact that was a good baseball game last night. There is talent on this team. There's talent that can still develop, and there is talent that can still help the Rockies on this team down the line. It's just when you're as weird as a team as the Rockies and in as weird of a situation where, yes, it's the rebuild, but it still doesn't fully feel like the rebuild type of stuff. You just start scratching your head sometimes if you get as much into the weeds as I do. Want to dive into one set of the numbers, and I'm also going to give the disclaimer now. I'm confident in my math, but my everydayers out there know me, quick math on the fly doesn't always work. But I wanted to take a look at the numbers of the Rockies against good teams and factor that into this conversation that we're having as well, as we're kind of just evaluating not only the game, evaluating the talent and evaluating what it all means for the Rockies. We're going to keep this conversation up, but with the context of winning percentage coming up next in today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. That means you can build your lineups your way. If you got your knowledge, if you're feeling confident about your picks, your players, guess what? You can pick them. And you pick 2 to 6 of them, and then you pick more or less. That's it on player stat projections, hits, walks, strikeouts, things like that. You can see all the goodness for yourself on PrizePicks and the PrizePicks app. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000, and PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, and we're happy to be your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, go check out Locked On MLB. Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here to provide daily national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the playoffs in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it covered every single day on Locked On MLB. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And guess what? You're finding this Locked On Rockies podcast on YouTube. You're clicking the like button. You're clicking the subscribe button because you want to help the show out, right? Because we really do appreciate it when you do that. Thank you so much for all your support always, because you Rockies fans have still shown up this season. Really appreciate that. And if you need to take your Rockies listening on the go, make sure that you're tuning into SiriusXM and the SiriusXM app. They got you covered there all season long. So again, I just wanted to kind of reset here and say that it's fun watching the Rockies play those games last night. It's good to watch them beat good teams. I mean, again, Mets underperformed, Mets or whatever, Mets are a cursed team, Mets. But still, the Rockies play well against teams above 500. And at one point, we're sitting pretty good against teams above 500. But I was starting to crunch the numbers here. So this is, again, where my math, you're going to have to help me out here. Or at least take what I'm saying with the grain of salt of me being honest about my abilities to do math. Currently, right now, the Rockies' record against Oh, wait, no. So this is their record against teams that are above 500. And it is, at one point, this used to be much higher in terms, much closer to 500. But it is currently sitting at 29-41. It's embarrassing that I realized I didn't interpret the greater than, less than symbol, and I did a bunch of calculations and stuff when I didn't need to. So that's kind of embarrassing. But 29-41 against teams with a record above 500. That's a winning percentage of 41%. So it's not horrendous. It's not bad. But it's also, it's kind of eye-popping. It's one of those stats where I sit there and I do get confident. I do get confident in this team's ability of playing good teams. I get confident in this team's ability to handle business at home. But it's slipping. You know what I mean? As the season has gone on, it feels like this divide has started to get a little bit wider. But you feel a little bit better about hearing that number, right? Yeah, I mean, originally I kind of started and I was down on it. I also did the calculations wrong and I thought it was lower. So now, as I'm revelating here in the middle of this, it's another thing to sit there and add to this whole intrigue of this. This is why the Rockies aren't completely boring. They're painful and frustrating because at their lowest and at their worst moments, they just seem so far off from other teams. And more often than not, they feel like they're in a completely different league in terms of performance. Because when we look at the run differential numbers, that is kind of the reality check that just smacks you in the face when you're looking and thinking about things for the Rockies. But these type of things, these types of storylines are the types of things that when you say what's worth focusing on, what's worth being excited about, they've won 40% of their games against teams that are above 500. That means if the Rockies were just a little, just again, if they could just be marginally less bad against the worst in the business, then you'd be sitting there being stoked on a 40% win percentage against the teams that are above 500. It's really something that shows that that there is the possible light. But again, I just can't sit here necessarily. How excited can we truly get over a 40% win total, or hitting the over of 61 wins and barely avoiding 100 losses? That type of stuff just kind of it negates some of my intrigue, but that's not, I guess maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is more to watch with a close full eye on games like last night when they do play good teams and when they play them well, and see that, hey, when they're getting closer, they can improve. If they improve in these areas, these pieces and these things can not only help, but be enhanced perhaps, and help get them over the hump. But that still just feels so far off. It still just feels like it all goes back to consistency, man. I can't sit here and be and just be on the hopium and just keep, just finding the silver linings of things to keep me blind to the fact that this team could still easily lose over 100 games this year. Just one good game and the flashes of moments and a 41% win rate against teams above 500 isn't enough to completely quell my concerns with this team. But I do, when I see that number, when I see games like last night, I am reinvigorated and re-pumped up with what could happen with the Rockies. It's just a matter of it's still just, I mean, the good games still don't always feel real. And that's because they've been few and far between at moments in this season. So it's how much stock can I really put in on just, how much can we really get hyped up about one game or a higher than we thought win percentage against teams above 500 that still isn't even a 500 or a 50% win percentage. I'm just in such a weird spot when it comes to my Rockies-ness of enthusiasm for things that I'm actually intrigued and excited by, and things that have been really frustrating over the last few seasons and this season especially, and how they've come kind of head to head into a situation. Because again, I'm still in a point where the trade deadline still seems weird to me. I don't want to harp on that. And again, I'm not going to just sit here and be like, trade deadline was bad, do that stuff. It's just weird. All in all, the Rockies are weird. And unfortunately here, we have to highlight one of the biggest issues with putting the blinders up sometimes and only focusing on the small sample sizes, because the Rockies are only accompanied by a team that's on pace to be one of the worst offenses of all time. Good news is that the company is more like the only two on one side of the graph, and there's still a gap in between the worst and second worst. Still makes the Rockies an outlier. I'm going to talk about that coming up in segment number 3 of today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Liquid IV. Liquid IV is going to help you reach your hydration goals, and it's possible to reach your hydration goals because Liquid IV has got you covered with electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients from the #1 powdered hydration brand in America, because baseball and summer go together like Liquid IV and indulgent hydration. You know how important it is, folks. You're out there on the trails all summer long. It's the sun. It's a classic Colorado afternoon, not a cloud in the sky, sun's beating down, triple digits. Why not make sure that you are getting more from your water on the trail when you use Liquid IV? You can stay hydrated while traveling. It'll help you stay hydrated at all those summer music festivals. And you can check out all sorts of flavors like Popsicle Firecracker, a festive blend of citrus-fueled lemon, lime, tart, cherry, and raspberry flavors. It is powered by LIV Hydra Science, an optimized ratio of electrolytes, essential vitamins, and clinically tested nutrients that turn ordinary water into extraordinary hydration. Tear, pour, live more. One stick plus 16 ounces of water hydrates better than water alone. No more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We are free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind when it comes to the Colorado Rockies. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Shout outs to you for doing that. Really appreciate it. And don't forget, we got you covered here with all your daily Colorado Rockies talk. So subscribe to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel so you don't miss out on the video podcast and all your play-by-play action all season long. Well, SiriusXM, they got you covered there. So we've been talking about this weird thought space that I've been in with the Rockies, and things that I've been enjoying about last night. Ryan McMahon dazzles with great defense. Jake Cave comes up big in another moment. Brendan Rodgers and Elias Diaz are acting like the anchors that we hoped they were. But as I'm looking at the numbers and as I'm looking at things, I unfortunately see something next to the Rockies, and they're in rough company. The Rockies have a run differential of minus 177. That's second worst in all of baseball, only behind the Chicago White Sox, who are historically bad and have a minus 247. The Miami Marlins at minus 153. So third place, a little close. as well. But then the three of them are really on an island, all on their own. The next closest team does not have triple digits in terms of run differential. It is the Angels at -96. If you're curious about other teams that the other bottom dwellers in other divisions like the Rockies, the Cubs actually have a +1. I already sold the Marlins. -50, 153. The Athletics -73. The White Sox, of course, -247. And the Toronto Blue Jays at -85. It is a massive, massive, massive problem. This is when you're talking about things that provide the reality checks for the Rockies. It is this, and it is the road record. These things are the harsh realities that while even in good stretches, good moments, and good highlights for the Rockies, that come back like this like a bad stomach ache. The Marlins are a team that they sold off. It started off bad and have also been perennial there. The A's were considered or were on fast track to be again talked about as a bottom dweller. But I remind you that the A's are sitting at -73. That's 104 more than the Rockies. That's a huge gap. That gap between the Rockies and the A's is more of a gap than the Rockies to the historically bad, one of the worst offenses ever, Chicago White Sox. And I know it's not that close. I know the White Sox are 70 more above the Rockies, but still, that's how far off the Rockies are as an offense from the A's. That's at a hitter-friendly ballpark with guys that are supposed to be able to hit, quote unquote. So unfortunately, when you look at something like that, it really just pours cold water on anything, because that's the type of harsh that's the stuff the Rockies have to start correcting. And it's too late to really make a massive dent in that in the season, but it's, the month by month sample, the August and September month sample, and even July would be nice as well, because it factors in about half the season there. In the second half of the season, it'd be great to see that run differential can just go down. But unfortunately, I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. I don't think it's outlandish if the Rockies don't play well on the road and go through some bad stretches, looking at the strength of the schedule and looking at teams trying to ramp up for the playoffs. I mean, they could get to that 200 range. Luckily, the team's been hitting more home runs and been more of a threat on offense and been doing more, so they've been avoiding the shutout a little bit more, but this team has been shut out multiple times. That run differential highlights how big of the issue is on both sides of the ball, on offense and defense. It shows how much of a problem getting outs and avoiding big innings and avoiding getting drummed from the pitching staff. And it highlights how bad the offense has been at stretch during points at this time, with or without Coors Field. So again, it just kind of adds one of those things where I don't want to completely negate the good and the fun and the enjoyment of a game like last night. But just when you have that big of a red flag looming, that big of an issue looming over you, it does spoil a little bit of the fun. It does spoil a little bit of the hype. Because what I need to see is the Rockies really flipping that script and having those young guys really helping out, leading that way, more so than record against above 500 teams. Because a -177 run differential is a problem. See if the Rockies can win the series tonight here, taking on the Mets in game number 2. It's going to be another good one, hopefully, for the Roccos as they look to pick up their 43rd win of the season. Ryan Feltner on the bump here, taking on Paul Blackburn for the New York Mets. First pitch just a couple hours away. Little pregame pod for you here with my weird schedule. So I know this wasn't out in the morning, but thanks for rocking with me here in the afternoon. Folks, thanks you again so much for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On MLB, hosted by your pal Sully. And if you need more Colorado sports coverage, Locked On Broncos, Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets, and Locked On Buffs, free and streaming, available on your favorite streaming services. Until next time, folks, this is Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.